Do you enjoy playing with Embers but wish there were some more powerful tools and maybe even more particles? Then Aetherworks may be for you. Creepings everybody, welcome to my first mod spotlight. Today we'll take a look at Aetherworks or Aetherworks, depending on where you're from, I suppose. Aetherworks is an add-on for Embers that adds a bunch of cool new tools as well as a crown that lets you apply potion effects permanently. Before you get started with Aetherworks, make sure you at least have mid to end game stuff in Embers. You definitely need the exchange table, otherwise you won't make too much progress in this mod right away. The first thing you want to find is this Etherium ore. It's pretty rare, it spawns about Y level or between Y level 80 and 128, and you only get like a small vein. Something like this, maybe smaller, like those guys. Ideally you want to hunt these at night because they do emit light, so it's easy to spot from a distance. You can see there's some, and there's some as well. You need at least a diamond pickaxe to mine these guys, and if you do, you get one Etherium shard per ore. You can also use the clockwork pickaxe from Embers to mine these as well. And ideally you want to get a fortune pickaxe, as you do get more of these shards. I believe it's up to 4 per ore. Since the Etherium ore is pretty difficult to find, there is a better way to get more Etherium shards, but for that you need at least 12 of these. Then you turn your 12 Etherium shards into these Etherium lenses, either using copper or bronze. And then you want to create 4 moonlight amplifiers and 1 Etherium prism out of these lenses. You also will require a couple of archaic bricks, edge, a fluid vessel, these Etherium lens focusing matrices, and a Etherium prism support. Then you're going to have to build a multi-block structure. You start with the fluid vessel, put 2 of these supports on top, and then the prism at the very top. Then you place archaic bricks in a circle around it, 2 blocks apart on this side, and then one like this in between. And then on the edges you put another block on top. And then on top of each of these bricks you put these edges. Alright, once that's done, on the highest pillar you place these moonlight amplifiers pointing towards the prism in the center. And then on the smaller pillars you place these focusing matrices. You know you built this correctly when after a few seconds you see these runes appear on these blocks. Now to actually for this thing to do anything, you have to make it nighttime. As soon as it's nighttime, you will see your construction here create impure Etherium liquid. Okay, now that we have the impure Etherium, we need to purify it, and for that we send it over to our base, over to the centrifuge from Embers as well. And by the way, both liquids, the purified and the impure Etherium, are liquids that float upwards. So once you get your impure Etherium, you just dump it into your centrifuge along with molten electrum, which will create Etherium once you give it power and stuff as well, Embers power. And you do get quite a bit as well. 8 millibuckets of electrum and 8 millibuckets of impure Etherium will create 60 millibuckets of Etherium. Now this liquid is going to be used in a lot of crafting. You can also send this over to a stamper that has a flat stamp on the top to create more of these Etherium shards. Now the shards are actually not used in too many recipes, besides the lenses that we needed for the construct, but it also is required for one of the pickaxe heads. It's also a nice way to, I suppose, store liquid Etherium, as you can melt these down again in a melter to get liquid Etherium. The next thing you want to build is the forge. The forge is also a multi-block structure that can process different things into different items. To get started, you just want 9 dawnstone blocks, and then you just hit the middle with your hammer. Then we need to put the Etherium forge core, which also again requires alchemy, just on the middle. And if it's correct, you will see some runes on the side, just like this. I also recommend making one of these heat gauges and put them on top, because we will have to heat up this forge in order to process some items. Depending on what you want to craft, you need to heat up the forge to a specific temperature. In order to actually heat up the forge, you will need to make these Etherium forge heaters. You can just start with 1. The more you have, the quicker it will heat up. So for testing purposes, I'm going to place 2 of these. And you also need a heat source below. You can just dump down a bucket of lava. It doesn't have to be a source block below. It can be flowing lava as well. Once that is done, you also need to provide it with water. So we're just going to place a fluid vessel here, fill this with water, and give this a signal. It will drain the water and provide both of those at the same time. On top of that, both of these guys need embers as well. All right, now that both of these are receiving embers, you also need to power them with a redstone signal. So just can place down a lever. And now you will see it slowly heat up. It takes a little time to speed up, but then once it's fast, once it's going, it goes up pretty quickly. And again, if you turn off one of them, it just slows down slightly. And if you turn off all of them, after a while, the heat will slowly start to cool down again. Now, you don't want to exceed the 3000 temperature. If you do, this whole thing will explode. So one solution to this, to not have it blow up, is to use cooling devices. Now there's two different kinds. There is the forge cooler, which requires a block of ice below. And again, it also needs embers and a redstone signal. And it is supposed to cool down the forge by 500 heat if you provide it with a signal and have a block of ice below. However, it doesn't seem to work in the current version I'm using. So if you're using a different version than I am, chances are this is working again. An easier way to cool down the forge is using these forge heat vents. They're also a little bit cheaper to make. And basically, if you attach them to the forge, it will vent out the heat. And each of these reduces the heat by 0.5 per tick. I believe the heaters increase it by 1 per tick. So you do need exactly 2 of these to counterbalance a heater. So if I have the heater on and 2 of these guys, the temperature will not change. If I remove one, it will slowly heat up. If I place 3 of them, it will slowly go down. So you can kind of use this to just let this heat up until you have the right temperature and then place down the vent to keep it at that level. Obviously, it will constantly consume embers. So once you're done with your crafting, it might be a better idea to just shut it off again. And like I mentioned, each recipe seems to need a different type of temperature, a min temperature. Some of them also require a max temperature. So you can't go above certain values. From what I can tell, the ideal temperature is around 2600. That seems to cover pretty much every single recipe that's currently in this mod. Once you reach a certain amount of temperature, you also see these new particles show up here. And if you would let this get too high, you'll see some flames occur. And now that we are at 2600, I'll just place down all 4 vents and we'll stay around this temperature. Now there's 2 ways to craft with this forge. 1 using the forge metal former and 2 using the forge anvil. So let's take a look at the metal former first. For either of those 2 things to work, you do also have to provide the forge core with embers as well. Very important step. On top of that, we'll require a fluid vessel just at the side of this forge and fill it with our etherium. Our pure one, not the impure one. And that will automatically fill the metal former, as long as it's attached anywhere on the side of this construct. And then once you have your liquid in there, you just right click with your item, see some fancy particles. And while it's doing its thing, it does reduce the heat, so you need to make sure to keep it up again. And just check your recipes for how much temperature you need. In our case, that was enough, so it was fine. And then once it's done, you just right click and you get your item. And then once you have 3 of the plates and 3 of the ingots, you can make the forge anvil. And same as the metal former, you just place it on top of your forge, just like this. So the forge anvil works a little bit different. Let's say we would want to make this aetherium tool rod, which requires a crude aetherium tool rod, which we can easily make using the ingots we just crafted in a crafting bench. But then we also need to look at what we require here. We need a heat between 2100 and 3000. And then we see this little icon with the hammer, 15 times hammers, and embers per hit, 50. So that's very important. Basically, you just right click this on the anvil, and as soon as you do, you see this little exclamation mark. Every time you see this exclamation mark turn green and you hear the little sound, you just right click it with your hammer. Every time you do that, you consume embers, it consumes embers that it currently has stored in there. It also increases the heat every time you do this. So you got to be careful with that as well. If it gets too hot, you probably want to like lower the temperature a little bit to make sure it doesn't blow up or anything like this. If you don't do it at the right time, or you just wait too long, you hear this breaking sound. You can fail up to 3 times. At the 3rd time, the item will break. Once we do this for 15 times, or however long the recipe told us to do, we get the crafted item. There we go, cerium tool rod. But unfortunately, the tool rod on its own is not magical enough, so you do need to use the exchange table once again to imbue it and make it magical. So let's check out what some of these tools actually can do. We'll start with the Axe of the Ancient Torrents. Basically, if you hold right click, you apply a bone meal effect in a 16 block range around you. You can see the crops grow, grass spreading, tall grass appearing. And of course it also counts as an axe. The Axe of the Twisted Realm basically lets you chop down a tree by holding right click, and it will start with the furthest log away. So if I hold right click on this bottom one, it will eventually mine or chop down the entire tree starting at the very top. On top of that, if you have a mantle jar in your offhand, any of these axes will mine a 3x3, which you can turn off by pressing shift right click to toggle it on or off. Shift right click, it's on again. Every tool has that effect. And all of these tools also have this Etheric 2 enchantment, which means when you're standing in moonlight, it will slowly repair your tool over time. And there we go, both tools fully repaired. Next, let's take a look at the shovel of the ineluctable changes. Basically, it's, well, a normal shovel. And if you hold your mantle in your hand, you also can do this 3x3 mining. If I turn on AE mode. There we go. But it also has a different effect. If I take a block and shift right click the block while looking at it, you can now see it in the bottom right corner, the icon there. It now shows the block I just right clicked. If I now right click any other block, it will replace any adjacent blocks of the same type with the block I just shift right clicked. So if I want to turn it back into dirt, just shift right click the dirt and right click the stone. Awesome. The shovel of the perfect machine works a little bit different. If you shift right click a block, you also copy it in the bottom right corner, but it also has a different type of icon above it. It's like 4 pistons or something with a cross. If I right click this face now, it will attempt to place a 3x3 of the block I just selected in front of me. Just like that. If I click on the top of the face, it places like a wall. If you click on the side, it places it like a ceiling, I guess. If you hold control and then use your mouse wheel to scroll up and down, you can switch between those 2 modes. Now, the pistons have these arrows going to the outside. In this mode, it tries to place blocks around the block I right click on. So if I right click on this face, it will place the blocks around it like this way. If I right click on the top, it will place a ring around it like this way. The pickaxe of the Boundless Sky will be able to mine veins if you just right click it. So if there's a coal vein, for example, we right click, it mines the entire vein. I believe the range is also 16. I'm not 100% sure on that one though. If you right click stone, it will mine stone. If you want to ever interrupt the vein mining, just unselect the tool. And again, with all the other tools, if you hold the mantle in your offhand and you shift right click to enable AoE mode, you can mine a 3x3, which of course doesn't really have an effect on vein mining. The pickaxe of the Molten Core works a little bit different. Every time you mine, you have a chance of getting a geode. Here we go. I got a couple here just from mining stone. I got the magma geode, warm to the touch. It depends on which biome you are in when you mine stuff. Because this is a savanna, I suppose this counts as a warm biome, so I get these warm geodes. If I mine in a plains biome, I would just get a normal geode. And there's all kinds of different ones. The frozen one, magma, oceanic, and geode, so even in the end, and the nether one. Now each of them can be used in the anvil with a couple of hits and, a little bit of heat to turn into different things. For example, the geode gives you all kinds of vanilla ores as well as some of the stones. Same as the frozen one and the magma one. I'm not sure if there's a different chance for like different ores, but the oceanic one gives you things like prismarine crystals, etc. The end one will give you endstone or obsidian, and the nether one gives you all kinds of nether things, either netherrack or nether quartz. Last but not least, let's take a look at the Ethereum crown. Again, this requires a couple of crafting steps to actually turn it into this magical form, and it also comes with Etheric 2, which again means when it's nighttime, it will repair itself. But to make this even better, because on its own it doesn't really do much other than, give you protection similar to Diamond Helmet, I believe. Yeah, it's the same as a Diamond Helmet. You want to make these potion gems. Again, Ethereum ingots and gems, nothing fancy here. Once you get some of these, you can combine these with any type of potion, for example this night vision potion, and it will give you this gem that is imbued with night vision. Now that you have this, you just combine this with your crown and you apply the effect to your crown. If I put this on, not only look I very fabulous, but I also now have night vision the entire time. And you can see it does like refresh itself every single time. If I take it off, obviously the effect will run out. If you're not happy with an effect, you can just put this back into your crafting table and you get the gem back as well as the crown without the effect. And then you can just imbue something else. For example, we can make the jump potion, fire resist potion, and also the speed potion. And then just combine it with the crown again to get a different effect. Now I'll have speed 2 the entire time. There we go. Takes a couple of seconds to kick in. You can also just take this crown that currently has an effect, and instead of taking out the gem, just combine it with a new gem to replace the current one. You can't stack these, unfortunately. Otherwise, that would be pretty overpowered, I suppose. But if you do this, you do get the old gem back as well in your crafting grid, so you don't waste them or anything. And now I'll have fire resist. Very good for the nether. And if it wasn't clear from early on in the intro, you can also make these bricks out of Ethereum ingots, which emit light and particle effects. But that's all for the spotlight for today. If you want to play with the mod yourself, download links will be in the description below. Hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, I would muchly appreciate a like. And I'll see you guys soon. Bye bye.